You are watching Community Inspired, KGCT 8.
We're at the peak of hurricane season right now, and so having the correct insurance is extremely important. So I'm joined by Kimmy, a licensed insurance agent today, so we can go over exactly what type of insurance policies you're going to need to make sure you're covered if and when we get a storm, which we hope we don't. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's get into what type of insurance do folks need, especially living close to the coast. So I know there's a lot of different policies. So let's just kind of walk through those policies one at a time. Let's talk a little bit about your ordinary homeowner policy. What would that typically cover?
So that covers like the structural of your home. So dwelling would be coverage A, which normally people are like, oh, what is covered on my home? Like in court, like if something were to happen, like as a fire or something like that, that is your structure, right? And then you have your other structures, that anything that's not attached to the house. And then you've got your personal property, which I usually tell people, if you flip your house upside down and you shake it, everything that's not attached to your house, that's your personal property. And then you got your loss of use. So in case of a hurricane or a storm, that's what covers. Usually I don't do 12 months, I'll do 24 months because I've been in a lot of cases where they've had fires and you can't cover just 1 year. So usually you do 2 years. And then you got like your additional living expenses too, so they cover your hotel and different things like that as well. And then Farmers has extra things in there like, you know, furs and money and antiques and different things like that is included in the coverages.
And jewelries and that type
Yeah.
of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're talking about a homeowner's policy, isn't it really important to understand what the limits are and to make sure you have adequate coverage, not just get a quote and they're going to cover you for $10,000, but you may have $50,000 that you really need to cover. So what do you look for in that HO policy or homeowner's policy?
So originally, actually, I'll go by what the client says, but I also go by the CAD. I look at the pictures of the house. If they don't have pictures of the house, then obviously I really have to go by what the client says. I also pull the WPI 8 and that goes more into the windstorm. And then I kind of assess it myself by looking at everything. And then I ask the client, how much personal property do you have? A lot of people don't normally go over $100,000 if they have a $350,000 to $400,000 home. Now, if they got a $800,000 home to $1 million home, then they're going to have a lot more personal property. I think the most is $200,000 that's been covered on personal for personal property.
Okay, so it's important that when you're getting that policy that you read through it, make sure you understand it, and for any questions, make sure you get answers so that you don't end up having a claim and then you learn or realize that you don't have the correct coverages.
Absolutely. A lot of misconception that I get on a daily basis is they say that, well, once we pull the replacement cost, which is basically if the house were to catch on fire or something, to build it from the ground up, the labor, everything that is in cost of today is highly expensive because of inflation and everything else going on. So they'll say, well, that's not what my house is appraised for. It has nothing to do with what your house is appraised for on your replacement cost, which is your structure A. That has to do with today, if your house were to burn down, this is how much it would actually cost. Labor, brick, everything has nothing to do with the appraisal.
And so now let's go a little bit deeper here, and this is where it gets a little more complicated, and that's windstorm and flood and such. So now let's talk about windstorm. If there's an actual hurricane, what does the windstorm cover and what doesn't it cover?
So the windstorm is basically, they call it like the act of God. So anything Mother Nature related. So if wind knocks over your trees and it hits your roof, anything actually with your roof, but it has to make any kind of damage to your roof. Tornado, hurricane, anything like that is what will be the wind. Wind-driven rain, that also is covered under windstorm. So if the rain is pulled in by the wind and it starts to flood, that will actually be covered under the windstorm.
Okay, so when we're talking windstorm, that doesn't mean that you automatically have flood insurance. That's a whole different policy. So the windstorm is really damage that's caused by the hurricane, by the wind specifically.
Absolutely, yes. And like I said, only if the wind drives in the rain and it starts to flood your house, then that's the only time that the flood, considered the water, would be covered. But it's different from flood.
Okay, so now let's get into flood. Let's talk about flood insurance because we were talking before we started the interview, and we all have, being a licensed adjuster, we've all heard the horror stories about I flooded and I never thought I would. So let's talk about that flood policy. What is it that's so important to make sure you get that right?
So a lot of people are misunderstanding with flood that because they're in an X zone, they don't need flood insurance. But I have been an insurance agent for 16 plus years, and I have seen horror stories where they were in an X zone and those were the actual people that flooded, especially during Harvey, because they were not expecting something to sit over us and just hover, which caused the rising water. Flood only covers rising water. In Kerrville, nobody expected what happened in Kerrville either. So in those types of devastations, you don't want to be that what if scenario. And I do know that with flood, FEMA has remapped over 250,000 homes in the state of Texas. So if you were in an X zone, you probably will be in an AE zone anytime now. It's really important to make sure, like the structure, it's really less likely that you're going to need the whole entire amount of the dwelling coverage on the flood. Like 250,000 is the max, but it's not likely you're going to need that unless literally the water goes over your roof and it's completely damaged, right? And the same thing with the personal property, unless it damages like the below and your TV and different things that are on that level get damaged. So the flood insurance more so is important because, especially if you're on the water, if you live in Galveston County, we have those types of unexpected whoopsies. And right now we're in hurricane season. So you're not out of the danger zone yet.
Well, let's talk a little bit about policy limits. What do policy limits mean? Why are those so important when it comes to the coverage and if you ever have to file a claim?
Are you talking about for flood?
Yeah, for any type of policy, whenever we're talking policy limits, you were talking about when there's a flood, if it goes over the roof, then you probably have a total loss home as opposed to just repairs if you get 2 or 3 feet of water in there. And we talked earlier about the different types of coverages for furs and jewelry and such. And I know that as a license adjuster, often I would run into, no, you've hit policy limits. What does that really mean for a consumer?
Okay, so like with flood, the max is 250,000. You can write 200,000. You can write 150,000, and that's kind of an estimate as far as like the structure goes. However, you're really not going to need those limits unless, like I said, it's a total loss on the home from rising water. The deductibles are really important because the higher the deductible, the lower the premium in that moment. However, then when the loss actually happens, you're going to be paying a high amount on your flood. Most flood damages are 20,000 to 50,000 and up. So with you having a high deductible of $10,000, I mean, and you have a $250,000 home, that's half of your price, right? Same thing with your homeowners. So I write 1% on all other apparels. I don't like to do 2%, 3%, and more because that comes out of the structure of the home. It's a percentage of that. And then the deductibles as far as the windstorm, you're safe doing a 5%. Like if you've never had a loss and you're not really in a danger zone, a lot of lenders will ask me to do a 5%. I'm okay with that. But I usually will always put out 100% replacement cost because you don't want to have 80% and below and have actual cash value, because then you're getting nothing for the home.
Yeah, good point. Let's talk a little bit about when folks are getting quotes on coverages and make sure that people understand when you're comparing all these quotes, they're not always the same. No. We're talking at the apple and orange comparison here. So when we're talking about quotes and somebody says, I've got an extraordinary price on an insurance policy here, what's usually the catch on that?
So usually when a client is looking for a insurance quote, I will have them send me their declaration pages, because what I have found with discrepancies is that it's not written correctly. Like, so for instance, if the wind is included, but it'll say named perils, that means that if there's a storm that comes in the Gulf and it's not named, they're not covered under that. They don't have wind-driven rain under there. So wind-driven rain is extremely important. It's actually one of the most important for windstorm. So you have to look at those hidden words that they don't tell you about, and that's why your insurance is as cheap as it is. I mean, the expression that I always use for clients is that, okay, you have a Porsche, what kind of gas are you going to put in your Porsche? You're not going to put unleaded. You're going to put premium. Why? Because if you put unleaded, your Porsche is going to run like poop. It's the same thing. You get what you pay for, but there is a way to customize your insurance to make sure it's covered the way you need it to be covered, but it also fits your pocketbook, and that's what I'm all about.
Right, and so it's important to ask all of these types of questions to make certain that when you purchase that policy, you have what you really need, not just, I have insurance. And so if anyone wants to get in touch with you, because I'm telling you, you just heard from an expert here, so if you need to contact her, how would they do that?
So my cell phone is the best way. I always joke and tell people that I have no laugh. Insurance is my life. And I mean, I love what I do. I've been doing this a long time. So my cell phone is the best way, 346-810-1623. And I'm available 24/7.
Okay, very good. And what's the name of the agency that you're working with right now?
It is Howie Insurance Agency.
Okay, so Kimmy at Howie Insurance Agency. So if you need insurance or you need to speak with a real insurance expert, there she is. That's the one to contact. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching Community Inspired KGCT 8 News.